Ambassador Veltrix had watched many species fight. In her 400 years of service to the Galactic Federation, she had studied the warriors of 1,000 worlds. She knew how the Kreth fought with their acid spits. She understood the charging tactics of the massive Goron. She had documented the precise, mathematical combat patterns of the Synthex drones. But humans were different. She sat in the observation deck of the Federation flagship, watching the training exercise below with growing unease. The exercise pit was a massive arena, 300 meters across, filled with obstacles and defensive positions. On one side stood a squad of 8 Kreth warriors, their scales gleaming under the artificial lights. On the other side stood a single human soldier. "This is hardly fair," said Admiral Zorn, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "1 human against 8 Kreth. The betting pools have already closed. Everyone knows the outcome." Veltrix said nothing. She had read the reports from Earth. She had seen the footage from the border conflicts. Something about humans made her nervous in a way she could not explain. The starting signal sounded. The Kreth moved first. They were fast, covering ground in long leaps, their powerful legs launching them forward. Their strategy was simple and proven over 10,000 years of warfare. Surround the enemy, close in, strike with overwhelming force. The human did something strange. Instead of running or seeking cover, she stood perfectly still for 3 full seconds. Her eyes moved rapidly, tracking each Kreth warrior. Then she moved. Veltrix leaned forward. The human had not run toward cover. She had run toward the closest Kreth warrior. "What is she doing?" Admiral Zorn asked. "That's suicide." The Kreth warrior opened his mouth to spit acid, but the human was too close, moving inside the effective range before the acid could build pressure. She struck the warrior's throat, a precise blow that collapsed his windpipe. He fell. The other Kreth warriors adjusted their formation, spreading out to attack from multiple angles. It was textbook perfect. It was exactly what they had been trained to do. The human did not repeat her previous attack. Instead, she dropped low and rolled behind a barrier just as 3 streams of acid crossed through the space where she had been standing. She picked up a loose piece of debris and threw it hard. Not at a warrior, at the light fixture above them. The arena went partially dark. The Kreth had good vision, but they relied heavily on thermal signatures. The debris and smoke from the broken light confused their senses for 3 precious seconds. When the smoke cleared, 2 more Kreth were down. "How?" Admiral Zorn whispered. Veltrix watched the recording playback on her personal screen. In those 3 seconds of confusion, the human had moved through the smoke with her eyes closed, navigating by memory of the positions she had observed before the attack. She had struck both warriors in their vulnerable joints, places that their own training told them were protected by their defensive stance. She had learned their defensive patterns. She had learned them while fighting them. The remaining 5 Kreth regrouped. They abandoned their standard tactics and formed a tight circle, back to back, covering all angles. It was their defensive formation, used when an enemy proved too unpredictable. The human stopped again. She watched them for 5 seconds. Then she started to laugh. It was not a cruel laugh. It was the laugh of recognition, of understanding. She had figured something out. She picked up 2 pieces of debris, 1 in each hand. She threw them both at the same time, but at different speeds and angles. The Kreth tracked the objects, their defensive instincts forcing them to watch for projectile threats. Neither piece of debris hit them, but while they were tracking the objects, the human had moved again. She had circled around, using their momentary distraction to position herself at their only blind spot, the tiny gap where 2 warriors' fields of vision overlapped imperfectly. 3 more fell in rapid succession. The last 2 Kreth broke formation and ran. They were experienced warriors, veterans of dozens of battles. They knew when they were outmatched, but running from a human, Veltrix would learn, was often the worst choice. The human did not chase them directly. She predicted their paths, calculated where they would go based on their body language, their training, their instincts. She was waiting at each position before they arrived. The exercise ended in 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Admiral Zorn was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Veltrix with confusion written across his face. "I don't understand what I just witnessed," he said. "The Kreth are superior warriors, faster, stronger, more durable. Their tactics are refined over millennia. How did one human defeat 8 of them?" Veltrix finally spoke. "Because the Kreth fought the same way they always fight. Their tactics are refined, yes, perfected even, but perfected means finished. It means unchanging." She pointed at the human soldier below, who was helping the Kreth warriors to their feet, checking their injuries. That human changed her tactics 8 times during a 4-minute fight. She learned their patterns while they were using them against her. She adapted. "All species adapt," Admiral Zorn said. "It's a basic requirement for survival." "Yes, but most species adapt over generations, over centuries. It takes us decades of study to change our combat doctrines." Veltrix pulled up a biological scan of the human soldier. Humans adapt in real time, during the combat itself. Their brains are constantly building new connections, new patterns. They are never fighting the same way twice. Admiral Zorn studied the data. "This is concerning." "It should be." Veltrix closed her files. "The Federation has maintained peace for 12,000 years because we understand the capabilities of every species. We know how the Kreth fight. We know how the Goron charge. We know how the Synthex calculate. We can predict them. We can prepare for them." She looked down at the human soldier, who was now laughing with the Kreth warriors she had just defeated. They seemed to like her. They were asking her questions, trying to understand how she had beaten them. "We cannot predict humans," Veltrix said, "because they are still changing while we watch them." Admiral Zorn made a decision. "I want full surveillance on all human military activities. I want every combat engagement recorded and analyzed. We need to understand this adaptation capability." Veltrix nodded, but she already knew it was futile. By the time they analyzed one battle, the humans would have already learned from it too. They would have already changed. The war that would test this theory was only 3 months away. Commander Sarah Chen was not special. At least, that's what she always told herself. She was an average soldier from an average family from an average city on Earth. She had joined the military because she wanted to see the stars, and the recruitment posters had promised exactly that. Now she stood on the bridge of the human cruiser Persistence, watching the Federation fleet assemble on the long-range sensors. 300 ships, more firepower than humanity had ever faced. "They're not here to fight," said Lieutenant Park, her tactical officer. "This is a show of force. They want to intimidate us into accepting their terms." Sarah studied the formation. The Federation ships were arranged in a perfect geometric pattern, their weapons trained on the human colony on the planet below. It was beautiful in a way, a perfect expression of overwhelming military power. "What are their terms again?" she asked. "Humanity must limit our expansion to 12 star systems. We must submit all new technologies for Federation approval. We must provide detailed reports on all military developments." Park's voice was bitter. "They want to keep us contained." Sarah understood the logic. The Federation had maintained peace for 12,000 years by ensuring no single species could challenge their authority. They had watched humanity expand across dozens of systems in just 2 centuries. They had seen the reports from Ambassador Veltrix about human adaptation. They were afraid. "How long until their deadline?" Sarah asked. 6 hours. She nodded slowly. 6 hours to decide the future of humanity. 6 hours to find a way to survive against impossible odds. Sarah Chen started to think. The Federation flagship was called the Eternal Order. It was the largest ship in the galaxy, 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Admiral Zorn commanded from its bridge, surrounded by tactical displays showing every aspect of the standoff. "The humans have not responded to our ultimatum," reported his communications officer. "They will," Zorn said confidently. "They have no choice. Our fleet could destroy their entire military in hours. They must see that resistance is futile." Ambassador Veltrix stood nearby, watching the human ships on the display. There were only 47 of them, small cruisers mostly, with a few destroyers mixed in. By any reasonable calculation, they were hopelessly outmatched. So why wasn't she relieved? "Admiral," she said quietly, "I would advise caution." "Caution?" Zorn's 4 eyes blinked. "We have 6 times their numbers and 10 times their firepower. What is there to be cautious about?" "The humans have been watching our formation for 4 hours, Veltrix said. "They haven't moved, they haven't communicated, they've just been watching. They're paralyzed with fear, as expected." Veltrix wasn't so sure. She had seen that same stillness in the training arena, when the human soldier had stood motionless before suddenly defeating 8 Kreth warriors. It wasn't paralysis. It was observation, analysis, adaptation. "Admiral, with respect, I believe they're studying us." Before Zorn could respond, one of the tactical officers spoke up. "Sir, the human ships are moving." On the display, the 47 human vessels began to shift their positions. They weren't retreating. They weren't advancing. They were spreading out in what appeared to be a random pattern, ships moving in different directions at different speeds. "What are they doing?" Zorn demanded. "Unknown, sir. Their formation makes no tactical sense. It leaves them vulnerable from multiple angles." Veltrix felt the hair on her neck rise, or she would have if she'd had hair. Instead, her sensory tendrils retracted in instinctive fear. "It makes no sense to us," she said slowly, "because we don't understand what they're planning." The human ships continued their strange dance, weaving between each other in patterns that defied conventional military logic. The Federation tactical computers tried to predict their movements and failed. Their algorithms were designed to interpret and counter known strategies. This wasn't a known strategy. This was something new. Something that hadn't existed 4 hours ago. On the bridge of the Persistence, Commander Sarah Chen smiled. "Formation complete," Lieutenant Park reported. "All ships in position." "Begin Phase 1, Sarah ordered. For 4 hours she had watched the Federation fleet. She had studied their ship placements, their power signatures, their communication patterns. She had noticed things that no tactical manual would have taught her. The Federation ships were arranged perfectly, too perfectly. Their positions were mathematically optimal for maximum coverage and firepower, but that perfection came with a cost: predictability. Sarah had spent those 4 hours running scenarios in her head, testing ideas, discarding failures, refining successes. Her brain had been working overtime, building new neural pathways, new tactical connections. Now she was ready. "Sir, they're powering weapons," Park said, tension in his voice. "Expected, they'll fire warning shots first. It's in their standard protocols." Sarah had read every piece of information about Federation tactics she could find. More importantly, she had watched how they operated. Their protocols were their strength and their weakness. Predictable. Warning shots incoming. The Federation fleet fired. Hundreds of energy beams crossed the void, aimed at the space around the human ships. Warnings, demonstrations of power. Every single human ship dodged. Not randomly, precisely. They had moved before the shots were fired, anticipating the targeting patterns based on the power build-up signatures Sarah had identified during her 4 hours of observation. On the Eternal Order, Admiral Zorn stared at his display in confusion. They predicted our fire, how? Veltrix's tendrils were fully retracted now, pressed against her skull in instinctive terror. They watched us charge our weapons. They learned the patterns. They adapted. In 4 hours. In 4 hours. Zorn's confidence finally began to crack. All ships prepare for full engagement, fire at will. The Federation fleet unleashed its full power. 300 ships fired simultaneously, filling the space around the human vessels with deadly energy. And the human ships danced. Commander Sarah Chin moved through the chaos like water flowing around stones. Her ship rolled and spun, dodging fire that should have been impossible to avoid. The other human vessels did the same, each captain making split-second decisions based on what they were seeing, what they were learning, what they were adapting to in real time. Their targeting is based on predictive algorithms, Sarah announced over the fleet channel. They calculate where we'll be based on where we've been. The key is to never repeat a pattern, never move the same way twice. Be random, be creative, be human. The Federation's perfect tactics fell apart against an enemy that refused to follow the rules. But dodging wasn't enough. Sarah knew that. They couldn't win by just surviving. They had to fight back. All ships begin Phase 2. Target their communication relays. The human fleet stopped dodging and started striking. Not at the weapons that threatened them, not at the engines that powered their enemies, at the communications arrays that connected the Federation fleet together. Admiral Zorn watched in horror as his tactical network began to fragment. What are they doing? Veltrix understood immediately. They're not trying to destroy us. They're isolating us. Without communications, each of our ships becomes alone. They can't coordinate. They can't share information about human tactics. But their ships are smaller, weaker. It doesn't matter, watch. On the display, a human destroyer engaged a Federation cruiser twice its size. The cruiser fired standard attack patterns, the same sequences that had worked against 100 different enemies. The destroyer didn't just dodge, it learned. Each exchange gave its crew more information. Within minutes, they were anticipating every shot, moving before the cruiser even fired. Then they struck back. Not at random. At specific points they had identified as vulnerabilities, power conduits, shield generators, sensor arrays. They hadn't known these weak points an hour ago. They had figured them out during the fight itself. The cruiser's shields failed. Its weapons went dark. It drifted, disabled but not destroyed. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated. Human ships dancing, learning, adapting, striking. Federation vessels falling silent one by one. The war had begun, and humanity was writing new rules as they fought. 3 hours into the battle, Admiral Zorn made a decision that would change galactic history. All ships full retreat. His officers stared at him in shock. The Federation had not retreated from any enemy in 8,000 years. Their military doctrine didn't include the concept. Why would it? They always won. But they weren't winning now. Of his 300 ships, 97 were disabled, not destroyed. The humans had been careful about that. They had struck to cripple, not to kill, but the effect was the same. His fleet's combat effectiveness was dropping by the minute. And the humans hadn't lost a single vessel. Admiral, retreat will show weakness to the entire galaxy, his first officer said. Other species may take this as a sign to rebel. Then let them, Zorn replied, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was admitting. We cannot win this battle. Every minute we fight, the humans learn more about us. They get better. We stay the same. He looked at Veltrix. You warned me. I should have listened. The Federation fleet began to withdraw. The human ships did not pursue. On the Persistence, Commander Sarah Chin watched them go. Her body was exhausted, running on adrenaline and willpower. Her brain felt like it was on fire from 3 hours of constant adaptation, constant learning. But they had won. Lieutenant Park collapsed into his chair. I can't believe it. We actually beat them. Sarah shook her head slowly. We won this battle, the war isn't over, they'll learn from this, they'll come back with new tactics, new strategies. Then we'll adapt to those too. Sarah smiled. Yes, we will. She looked out at the stars, at the retreating Federation fleet, at the future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy, not with words, with action, with proof that they would not be contained, would not be controlled, would not be predicted. The Federation had ruled for 12,000 years by understanding every species, by knowing exactly what each one would do. They had finally met a species they could not understand, a species that changed faster than they could study, a species that adapted in real time. They had finally met humans, and nothing would ever be the same. Ambassador Veltrix stood before the Federation Council, the highest governing body in the galaxy. 12 representatives from 12 founding species sat in a circle around her, their ancient faces showing various degrees of concern. "Your report, Ambassador," said the council chair, a Vortian elder whose scales had faded to silver with age. Veltrix organized her thoughts. She had spent the last month studying every piece of data from the battle, every recording, every sensor log. What she had found terrified her. "The battle against the human forces lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes, she began. "In that time, the human fleet evolved their tactics no fewer than 47 times. They began the engagement using one set of strategies and ended using completely different ones." "That is normal adaptation," interrupted the Kreth representative. "All species learn during combat." "With respect, Representative, it is not normal." Veltrix pulled up a comparative analysis. "When the Kreth fight, you refine your tactics over a campaign, over weeks or months of warfare. You analyze battles afterward and develop new responses for future engagements. This is efficient and logical." "Yes, and it is also slow." Veltrix highlighted the timeline from the human battle. "The humans developed 47 new tactical responses during a single 3-hour engagement, not afterward, during. They were learning and adapting faster than our ships could update their targeting algorithms." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. "How is this possible?" asked the Synthex representative, its mechanical voice crackling with static. Veltrix had asked herself the same question. The answer had come from human medical journals, from their own research into their own biology. "The human brain is uniquely plastic," she explained. "Most species, including all 12 founding races, have brains that stabilize in adulthood. We learn during our formative years and then apply that knowledge throughout our lives. Humans never stop forming new neural connections. Their brains continue to rewire themselves constantly throughout their entire lives." "This seems inefficient," the Vortian chair observed. "Stable neural patterns allow for reliable behavior and predictable responses." "Exactly." Veltrix let that word hang in the air. "Our brains are designed for stability. Theirs are designed for change. In peaceful circumstances, this might be a disadvantage. In combat, where conditions change rapidly and unpredictably, it makes them devastating." She showed them the footage of Commander Sarah Chen during the battle. The human commander's vital signs were displayed alongside the video. Heart rate elevated but steady. Brain activity spiking constantly as new patterns formed in real time. "Watch her eyes," Veltrix said. "She's not just reacting to what's happening. She's building models, testing predictions, discarding failures and reinforcing successes. Her brain is essentially reprogramming itself as she fights." "And all humans can do this." The Goran representative's deep voice rumbled with concern. "All humans, it's not a special ability, it's not training, it's how their species works." Veltrix paused, considering her next words carefully. "This is why I recommended against military confrontation. We cannot win a prolonged war against humans. Every battle will make them stronger. Every engagement will teach them more about us. And we We cannot keep up." The council fell silent. Finally, the Vortian chair spoke. "What do you recommend, Ambassador?" Veltrix had thought about this question for weeks. The answer was difficult but necessary. Peace. Real peace, not dominance. We must treat humanity as equals, as partners, rather than as a species to be controlled. She looked around the circle of ancient faces. The Federation has maintained order by being stronger than any single species, but we have never faced a species that gets stronger the more we fight them. Traditional strategies of containment and control will fail. They will only accelerate human development. You suggest we simply accept them, let them expand freely. The Kreth representative's scales rippled with agitation. I suggest we make them our allies, give them a seat on this council, integrate them into the Federation as full partners. Veltrix took a deep breath. Because if we don't, we will eventually face them as enemies, and I have seen what they can do as enemies. I do not wish to see what they will become if given reason to truly fight us. The debate continued for hours, but Veltrix already knew the outcome. The council members were frightened. Fear made people do foolish things. But she hoped that wisdom would prevail. She hoped that the Federation would choose peace. Because if they chose war, they would learn the true extent of human adaptation. And she suspected it would be far more terrible than anyone could imagine. 6 months after the Battle of Proxima Colony, humanity received an official invitation to join the Galactic Federation as a full member species. Commander Sarah Chen, now promoted to Admiral, stood in the observation lounge of Earth's orbital station, reading the message for the 5th time. Behind her, Lieutenant Park, now Captain Park, waited patiently. "They're serious," Sarah said finally. "Full membership, voting rights, a seat on the council. After one battle where we proved we couldn't be beaten the way they're used to beating people." Sarah set down the tablet. "Ambassador Veltrix warned them. She told them we adapt too fast to be controlled. I guess they listened." Park moved to stand beside her, looking out at Earth below. Blue and green and beautiful, the birthplace of a species that had just changed galactic politics forever. What happens now? Sarah thought about it. What did happen when a species of rapid adapters joined a federation of stable, predictable civilizations? Would humans change to fit in, or would the Federation change to accommodate them? Probably both, she decided. That was how adaptation worked. Everything influenced everything else. Everything changed together. "Now we grow," she said. "We learn from them, they learn from us. We get better together." "You make it sound easy." "It won't be," Sarah smiled slightly. "But that's okay, we're good at dealing with hard things, we adapt." The stars stretched out before them, countless lights representing countless worlds, countless species, countless possibilities. For 12,000 years, the Federation had maintained order through control and prediction. Now humanity would add chaos and change to the mix. It would be messy. It would be difficult. It would force everyone to grow and adapt in ways they never had before. It would be beautiful. Ambassador Veltrix attended the ceremony when humanity officially joined the Federation. She watched Admiral Chen, the same woman she had observed defeating 8 Kreth warriors in a training exercise, take her place among the galaxy's leaders. Their eyes met across the ceremonial chamber. Chen smiled and nodded, a gesture of respect from one warrior to another. Veltrix returned the nod. She had spent her entire career studying species, trying to understand them, trying to predict them. Humans had taught her that some things couldn't be predicted. Some things could only be experienced. The future was uncertain now. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Federation faced a tomorrow they couldn't plan for. And somehow, that uncertainty felt less like fear and more like hope. The ceremony ended. The delegates mingled, and somewhere in the crowd, humans were already adapting to their new role, already learning, already changing. It was only the beginning. 3 years passed. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity spread across new territories, not through conquest but through integration. Human traders learned alien languages in weeks. Human diplomats adapted to foreign customs in days. Human engineers solved problems that had stymied other species for generations, simply by approaching them differently. But the most remarkable changes happened in the military. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded the first joint Federation human fleet, a mix of vessels and crews that would have been impossible to coordinate just a few years ago. Different species, different cultures, different ways of thinking, all working together. It should have been chaos. Instead, it was a new kind of order. "The pirates have fortified the asteroid belt," reported her Kreth tactical officer, a warrior named Threx who had initially despised humans for defeating his kind. Now, he was one of her most trusted officers. "Standard approach patterns will result in heavy casualties." Sarah studied the display. The pirates were a mixed group, raiders from half a dozen species who had decided that the changing Federation was an opportunity for profit. They had taken hostages from a mining colony. They thought they were safe in their heavily defended position. "Standard patterns won't work," Sarah agreed, "so we won't use them." She looked around her bridge at the diverse crew, Kreth, Goron, Synthex, Vortian, and Human, all watching her, waiting. "Threx, your people are excellent at direct assault, but you've always done it in groups, overwhelming with numbers." She pulled up a tactical display. "What if one Kreth warrior attacked from here, drawing their attention while the rest circled around?" Threx's scales rippled with surprise. "That is not how Kreth fight." "I know, that's why they won't expect it." She turned to her Synthex officer. "Your tactical algorithms are designed for mathematical precision, but what if we introduced a random element, made our movements unpredictable on purpose?" "Randomness decreases efficiency," the Synthex responded. "It also decreases predictability, and these pirates have been studying Federation tactics for years. They know how you fight. They're counting on it." One by one, Sarah worked with each species, suggesting modifications to their traditional tactics. Not replacements, modifications, taking their strengths and combining them in new ways. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Kreth warriors attacked individually, then regrouped in patterns that confused the pirate defenses. Synthex vessels moved in deliberately random patterns, making them impossible to target efficiently. Goron assault ships charged at unexpected angles, their timing coordinated with human vessels that adapted to enemy responses in real time. The pirates never had a chance. When it was over, the hostages were freed, the raiders captured, and not a single Federation vessel was lost. Admiral Zorn, now retired from military command and serving as a Federation observer, watched the recordings of the battle. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Remarkable," he murmured. "They didn't just fight together, they learned from each other. They adapted." Veltrix, standing beside him, smiled. It was an expression she had learned from humans. "That's what humans do," she said. "They adapt, and they help others adapt too. The Federation will never be the same." "No," Veltrix agreed. "It will be better." On the joint flagship, Admiral Chen dismissed her crew for rest. The battle was won, but there was always more work to do. Reports to file, strategies to review, lessons to learn. Always lessons to learn. Captain Park found her in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. "You should sleep," he said. "Can't." Sarah's mind was still racing, still processing, still adapting. "I keep thinking about what comes next." "What does come next?" Sarah considered the question. 3 years ago, she had been a simple commander, fighting for human survival against an overwhelming enemy. Now she was helping to reshape the entire galaxy. "More of this," she finally said. "More learning, more growing, more change." She looked at Park with tired but determined eyes. The Federation spent 12,000 years trying to keep everything the same, trying to maintain order through predictability. But that's not how the universe works. The universe is always changing, always adapting. And now so is the Federation. Now so is everyone, Sarah smiled. We taught them that change isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. We showed them that adaptation isn't a weakness, it's the greatest strength any species can have. Park sat down beside her. You make it sound like we planned this, like we knew what we were doing. Sarah laughed softly. We didn't, we were just trying to survive. But that's the thing about humans, we survive by adapting, by changing, by becoming whatever we need to be to face whatever challenges come our way. She thought about all the battles fought, all the lessons learned, all the changes that had transformed not just humanity but the entire galaxy. The Federation realized that human adaptation happens in real time, she said. During combat itself, they thought that was terrifying. They thought it made us unpredictable, dangerous. Didn't it? Maybe, but it also made us valuable, because we don't just adapt for ourselves. We help others adapt too. We shake things up. We force change, and change in the end is what keeps everything alive. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance. Worlds spun, species lived and died and evolved. The universe changed, moment by moment, forever. And somewhere in that vast cosmic tapestry, humans continued to adapt, to learn, to grow, to be human. The Federation had learned to accept that, more than accept, to embrace it, and in doing so they had begun to adapt themselves. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and exciting and full of possibility. No one knew what would come next. No one could predict what challenges lay ahead. But whatever came, they would face it together. They would learn from it together. They would adapt together. And that, Sarah knew, was the greatest victory of all. 50 years later, the history books would record this period as the Great Awakening, the time when the stagnant Federation learned to change again, when ancient species rediscovered how to grow, when the galaxy transformed from a collection of static civilizations into a dynamic, evolving community. They would credit human adaptation, human unpredictability, human chaos. But the humans knew the truth. They hadn't done it alone. They had simply reminded the galaxy of something it had forgotten. Change was not the enemy of civilization. Change was its heartbeat. And as long as hearts continued to beat, the future would always be uncertain, always be challenging, always be new. Always be worth fighting for. Admiral Sarah Chen, now long retired, read about herself in those history books and laughed. They made it sound so grand, so planned, so purposeful. In truth, she and her people had just been doing what humans had always done. They had adapted. And in doing so, they had changed everything.